Colorado for May 16th, 2022. And I want to thank all of our counselors for joining us. It looks like we're waiting for Counselor Weaver, who is running just a few minutes late tonight. And also we have, I was notified today by our city clerk that he is still under the weather with COVID and will not be joining us, but the duties will be handled by our deputy city clerk, Mr. Robin Eaton, so we appreciate his work tonight. We will start our meeting as we generally do with public comment on any item that is on the agenda. Our agenda tonight is item number 1, preferred concept designs for the green on 38th Avenue. Item number 2 is residential bulk plane, and item number 3 is 44th Avenue sub-area plan updates. So if you would like to speak on any of these items, I would invite you to come to the podium. I have no one signed up to speak, so if anyone is not signed up but would like to speak, you may come to the podium now. If you would please introduce yourself, give us your first name, your last name, and an address. Once that's completed, our clerk is going to hit the timing button, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the council.
Good evening. My name is Ihor Figlus, and the last name is spelled F-I-G-L-U-S, and I live at 9775 West 36th Avenue. So I'm really glad to see the City Council is finally getting around to moving forward on the bulk plane. This is something that the residents of Wheat Ridge have wanted for a while, as evidenced in a number of satisfaction surveys that have been done. I have a couple of comments based on, unfortunately I did not get a chance to look at the proposal, but just judging on the other bulk plane that's already in Wheat Ridge, I just wanted to add a couple of things that I think the council should take into consideration. I think that the bulk plane should apply to not just the sides, but also to the back of any property. And I think it's very important to codify what the original measurement, where is the bulk plane measured from? And it should be measured from the original grade. And there should be wording in there that prevents any funny business like a property owner building up the grade prior to selling or transferring title to a builder that will build on that property. I think that's really important. And the other one is, I think just as a point where it's to prevent any potential conflict, is it also must be required that all plans, architectural plans, must specifically meet, show that they're conforming to the bulk plan requirements prior to issuance of any construction permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who is here in council chambers that would like to speak on any agenda item tonight? Now is your opportunity, and I'll ask our Lauren is okay. So we don't have anyone with your hand raised in the Zoom format. So we will conclude our citizens' right to speak, and we will go to agenda item number 1. This is the preferred concept designs for the green on 38th Avenue. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have Mark Taylor here. I think you've met him before with Arctera, our design firm. I will turn it over to him in a bit, but I want to introduce this item, provide a little bit of background on this since we've been working on this since 2018, quite some time. So I just want to make sure everybody is up to speed on the history of this project, and then turn it over to Mark. He's going to talk about the community engagement process, the design process, and where we're at tonight. Tonight we're looking for consensus or direction from council on if we should move forward with final design, and also on which design or which parts of which design you would like to move forward with. But first of all, in 2018, 3 council members, nobody at this table, initiated the concept of redevelopment of what the community knows as the green on 38th. You all know this property is adjacent to 38th Avenue in front of Stevens Elementary, which has been used for numerous years for community events in cooperation with the school district. You also are very well aware that 38th Avenue has been the subject of discussion for many years specifically concerning the creation of a walkable, pedestrian-friendly business corridor or downtown or Main Street, whatever you want to call it. There's been numerous city guiding documents that reference 38th Avenue and this property, specifically 38th Avenue, though, as a major contributing factor in creating a vibrant community. The 2005 NRS, way back then, urged the city to pursue policies that encourage redevelopment and to promote 38th Avenue as a destination Main Street and a pedestrian-oriented place, mainly because Wheat Ridge at that time, and even today probably still, as we heard from a lot of our constituents, that Wheat Ridge is a community that lacks a defined center, such as Arvada, which is referenced a lot with Old Town, even Lakewood with Belmar. Residents in Wheat Ridge really wanted a place in Wheat Ridge they could define as kind of a city center. The 2009 comprehensive plan, the city's comprehensive plan, envisioned Wheat Ridge, also describes the future of 38th Avenue as a corridor that is transit and pedestrian friendly Main Street. And then the 38th Avenue corridor plan, which was done in 2011, I believe, recommended working specifically with Jefferson County School District to reinvest in the property in front of Stevens Elementary for community functions, non-school events, and the creation of public plazas and gathering places. And then most recently in the update to the NRS in 2019, the primary recommendation in that update was also to continue the reinvestment in the city's primary corridors, including 38th Avenue. So really the development of the green, even though it's maybe not, it's not specifically 38th Avenue, it's really a logical next step in meeting the goals of these guiding documents. And it's also really a great timing because of the Wadsworth project. It's a good replacement for the Town Center Park, which is just off of Wadsworth. As you know, it's fenced right now. Raleigh Bertos was in front of it. Raleigh Bertos was demolished recently. But the configuration of Wadsworth, once it's done, the signalized intersection that used to be at 3 Acre Lane is moving south to 41st Avenue. So the major entryway into that shopping center is going to be right adjacent to the park, which probably doesn't make sense to have a park where there's a major entryway into a shopping center. So this is a good opportunity. I think the 38th Avenue is just down the street from the current Town Center Park to relocate it and to really create a vibrant city center, park, plaza, whatever you want to call it, to replace the Town Center Park. So City Council provided consensus in 2018 to engage a design firm to develop some conceptual plans, and that's when we brought Terrace on and Mark Taylor. Yes, that was way back in 2018. There was some delay during COVID, which I think Mark will mention, or he did in his memo. That's in your council packet. We did come back to council in 2019. There was consensus at that time to continue moving forward and to develop some final preferred concepts after reaching out to the community and stakeholder groups to get input, which we did, and Mark will talk more about that. But we had a public meeting. We had several meetings with key stakeholder groups, including the school and businesses, parents, residents. We did significant online outreach through our What's Up Wheat Ridge. That's where we got a lot of our feedback. But at least on the online research, overwhelmingly support from the public at this point for the project. Only 2% of respondents to the online survey did not like either version of the conceptual plans. There's two versions right now that Mark will show you this evening. So a lot of support. There was slightly more support for option B, which you'll see this evening. And then also, the Parks Department is looking at an additional grant to help with the funding of the project. We're hoping anywhere between $500,000 and $700,000. And as part of that grant process, they needed to do some more additional community outreach. So they went into the school, they met with fourth graders who did some, I think I shared them with Mark, we should have shared some this evening, that did their own designs, which were pretty cute. But they also did an in-person survey with the businesses along 38th. They walked up and down. I think they met with 34 different business owners And that just happened recently in the last few weeks. There was 94% of those businesses support or strongly support this project. Only about 6%, the other 6% were neutral. They weren't against it. They were just neutral. Overall, what we heard from the businesses on this walk around was that they believe that these improvements at the green will or might benefit the business in the future, and by potentially drawing more members of the public to 38th Avenue. So with that, I want to turn it over to kind of where I left off and where we brought Mark and Arctera in and talk about kind of how we've gotten to where we are today.
Yeah,
That work?
that's great. Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. So, yeah, I thought I'd start by just kind of going through a little bit of background information, go through the process that we've gone through to kind of reach the point that we are with these two concepts, and then talk about some of the feedback that we heard in the public meeting and the online outreach that Patrick was just talking about. So I think you all probably know this site better than I do. So this is located on 38th, just east of Wadsworth. And it's right between Upham Street and High Court. And we're really looking at the area just south of Stevens Elementary, so really between Stevens and 38th. And the site is really sort of the front lawn of Stevens Elementary, and as Patrick said, this is an area that the city and school district have come to an agreement to use for some civic events. And that's been all kinds of things from Friday Night Live, Ridge Fest, the Criterium and Brew Fest, holiday celebration, trunk or treat. There's all kinds of things that happen there. But it was really never designed to host those kind of events. So, typically it's a pop-up stage and those kind of things. So this is a real opportunity to take a look at this site and really design this to be used and to accommodate those events that are happening. So as Patrick said, we started back in 2018 in October, and we met with a stakeholder group that Wheat Ridge staff pulled together, and that group included folks from Jeffco Public Schools. It included the principal and some other staff from Stevens Elementary, included some local business owners. At the time, West 38 was still being developed, so the developer was part of that. Folks from Local Works were there, so we had a pretty good group of stakeholders. And at that meeting, we really did a few things. We just sort of talked about the possibilities and what people wanted to see there. But we also developed this vision statement that you see up here, which is to create a flexible and safe gathering space that can be used for community events, concerts, and festivals, while also providing a physical buffer and separation from the school space. And then we also developed this list of key objectives, which is to include formal performance space, provide a permanent structure for shade and performance or event support, provide a space or use that draws visitors to the site when no scheduled events are occurring, to provide shade and cover for users of the park, provide physical and visual separation between the school and public space. That was very important to the school because of some of the programs that they have at Stevens Elementary. To include a large unprogrammed green space, and finally the design should be self-contained so that the adjacent roads don't need to be closed during festivals and events. And I promise I'm not going to read a lot of these slides to you. So the first thing that we did is look at 4 concepts actually, and we were really hired to look at the lawn space specifically. So we developed 2 quick. These were all very conceptual concepts, but we felt that we really couldn't get the separation from the school that was so important to the school. So then we started to kind of think outside the box a little bit. So we looked at one concept that just switched the parking lot and the parking lot and park space. The idea here was to at least get more separation from the entrance to the entrance to the school. And then the other one was reconfiguring the parking lot this way so that it really provides the separation between the park and the school. And it's really clear what is seen as school space and what is seen as park space. So city and school district met and really thought that this plan was kind of a win-win. It met the main objectives. So we developed this plan a little bit more, which included developing the parking lot design a little bit more with some input from Jeffco Schools to make sure we were meeting their requirements. And then this is what we brought to City Council. That was back in 2019. And after that, we started moving forward with developing this design. We did have a break there for COVID. So the first thing that we did was go back and meet with the stakeholder group, and that was the first time that they really got to see that previous plan. So based on that meeting, we had some key considerations to think about, and this is the last slide I'll read, and that was to continue to work with Jeffco Schools to further refine the circulation, to consider flexible space that allows for food trucks to park and booths to set up for some of these events, to consider the stage infrastructure, so power, raised stage, lighting, some things like that, to ensure visibility to the park and to the park from the school, to consider restroom and trash and recycling locations for those festivals and events, to ensure that the design, materials, and aesthetic are appropriate for Wheat Ridge. And the last one was the stakeholder group thought that a water feature was the preferred feature to sort of bring people to the site when we did not have events happening. But if that was not feasible, then maybe interactive art or some other use could be appropriate. So based on that, we've developed the two concepts that we took to the public, and I'll share those with you now. So the first concept is really based on that previous concept that we've been working with. So it's a very symmetrical design, kind of traditional. So some of the main elements here are, I think I can point these out. We've got the civic green right here. There's a stage and outdoor classroom here. What we're calling the Festival Promenade here. 38th Street Terrace is right here. There's a playground, what we're calling the Game Grove, and then we have some Sanilet enclosures over here. So first we'll look at the Festival Promenade. And the idea here is really to create that flexible space that has been a desire. So this would be a very wide walkway, about 20 feet or so. And on the outside edge of that, there'd be tables and chairs people can use during times when we don't have events going on. But then those could be moved and we could set up booths, we could have food trucks and things like that when there are events taking place. So you can see we've got some flag poles, some lighted columns that sort of highlight that threshold between the civic green and the Festival Promenade, a few more views. And then where the Festival Promenade meets the streetscape along 38th, we've got an area here that we're calling the 38th Street Terrace, 38th Avenue Terrace. So this, really the idea here is sort of a patio that can occur along this streetscape when people are walking along. This could have a fire pit, maybe some overhead lighting to kind of create some sense of space and place there. Obviously, this could also be used for viewing concerts and those kind of things. So a few views of what that could look like. Then the stage and outdoor classroom. So we are showing a covered stage here, and the intent is that that would be used as an outdoor classroom by the school during the day. And then we're also using landscaping behind that to kind of screen from the parking lot that's located right behind the stage in this concept. So a few views of the civic green there. This concept has a playground. And the intent here is not to have a traditional kind of post and deck playground, but to have something that's very sculptural, so that would add an aesthetic element when maybe when kids are not using that, or even during concerts and that kind of thing. And then on the opposite side of the park from the playground is the Game Grove. So this is right across from West 38, and the idea was to have this area where we've got some permanent ping pong tables and chess tables and those kind of things that could be used during the day. And then we've got a video fly through. Let's see if this... So we've sped this up a little bit, so it might look like people are speed walking a bit. But this is coming in from Upham and 38th, and then that's right. So here's a 38th Avenue Terrace. So you can see the landscaping there behind the stage, kind of screening from the parking lot. And then here's the game grove. And just at the far side of that, you can see where the Santa-led enclosure location would be. So that's the first concept. So for the second concept, we wanted to really think about the site a little bit differently, think about how we're interacting with some of the areas around, kind of surrounding the park a little bit differently. We wanted to better engage the area that's across Upham Street a little bit too. So this is concept B, and I'll point out a few things here as well. So the Civic Green is right here. There's a stage and outdoor classroom over here. The Festival Promenade kind of sweeps through the site here. There is the Upham Street Terrace over here that includes an interactive water feature and some seating areas that I'll show you, and then an area that we're calling the Grove right over here. So the first area we're going to look at is right where High Court meets 38th Avenue. And from this view, you can see how the Festival Promenade sort of leads you right into the park from that corner. So on the left side is the streetscape along 38th Avenue. And then heading into the right is the Festival Promenade. So there's an opportunity here for some entry signage, monuments, those kind of things. Looking at the Festival Promenade, again, similar to the last concept, a wider walk so there's room for booths and food trucks. In this case, between the Festival Promenade and the Civic Green, we've got a series of seat walls that people can sit on during events or during the day. There's trees, there's some light columns, so there's a little better view of that. But you can see how that could really service people who are at a concert using the food trucks and those kind of things. Moving over to the Upham Street Terrace. So the idea here is to have an interactive water feature. We thought this corner of the site was important because it is right across the street from West 38th. There's a restaurant space right on the corner there, so we think there's some real opportunity for some synergy in that area. You can see there's some stairs that this is set a little bit lower than the streetscape along 38th, which I think is important to have a little bit of separation there. But it's something that would be visible as you're walking or driving along the street. And at night, that could be lighted, so there's some activity that can happen along there. There's shade structure for parents or kids who are hanging out there as well. And then just across the way from that is this seating area at the Upham Street Terrace. So this has seating, shaded seating. People can bring lunches, those kind of things to hang out in the park. I think probably good seating for people who have folks that are using the interactive water feature as well. Just behind that, we have the Grove, which again is sort of a shaded seating area. Oops, there we go. With some lounge chairs and seating that sort of look on to the green. And then we've got a stage and outdoor classroom. In this case, this is facing west, so the green is a little bit longer. I think on the previous concept, it's sort of more squat. There's more viewing from the side. This is a little bit longer, so you can get more people facing the stage. And I think we've got a walk through. Oh, and I should also point out, same area, we've got Santa-led enclosures, and this could also hold mechanical infrastructure for the water feature as well. So this is coming in at High Court and 38th. And then here's the water feature. You can see the shelter there, shade structure. We've also talked about potentially having artwork or boulders or something in the water feature area, so there's something going on there when it's turned off, but the intent there is really that that's all flexible space. So during events, the water can be turned off and booths could be set up there. I think there's just more flexibility in that space. So then there's the green and the stage. Yeah, so that's our two concepts. So just a quick recap, that's concept A, and here's concept B. So with these, we had two kind of public outreach efforts. So one was an in-person meeting that we had at the Recreation Center, had about 40 people in attendance at that. Then we also, as Patrick said, we had all of this on What's Up Wheat Ridge, and we had the videos there with narration. We were giving a lot of background, so tried to give people as much information about the projects as we could. We had a lot of really good feedback from both of those efforts. So I guess first, looking at some of the information that we got from What's Up Wheat Ridge, I won't go through all of these questions, but the first couple of questions here were which plan provides the best space for events? And the second question was which plan provides the best amenities that will bring people to the site when we don't have events going on. So as Patrick said, 91 to 92% of people said either both plans or one or the other did that really well. Only 2% said neither did. Throughout this, concept B had a marginally higher number of votes. It was very, very close. But in all respects, it seemed like there was a little bit of a favor toward B. We asked about favorite and least favorite elements in each of the concepts. So I thought this was interesting. For concept A, the favorite element was the sculptural playground. That had 80 votes. The game grove was the least favorite. And the playground actually also ranked as the second least favorite with 40 votes. And then we asked the same thing about concept B. So the top three items all had to do with the Upham Street Terrace. So that was the water feature, the seating area, and the shaded seating. And all of those items had more votes than the playground from concept A, actually. And the least liked item was the water feature also, but that had 38 votes. So there were more people sort of opposing the playground, I guess, than the water feature, just for some perspective. But again, it was very close. One question we asked was whether or not these concepts met the vision statement that we had provided. 93% said that either one or both did, and it was less than 2% that said neither. And again, concept B was slightly favored. And then in our in-person meeting, I think we had sort of a mix of folks, a few who were opposed and a few who were strongly in favor. And I think the folks who were opposed, what we mostly heard was either that they didn't think we should be doing anything, shouldn't spend any money on this project at all. There was some concern about traffic and parking, and there was also some concern about people experiencing homelessness using the site. And then we also had a fair number of people who were in favor of it, thought either plan would be great, just something to really improve that area. And then finally, on What's Up Wheat Ridge, we also gave folks an opportunity to just provide some comment. And we had overwhelming support for the project. There was some concern about various elements, from fire pit to water feature, but there were people sort of both in support and expressing some concern about some of those elements. So, but I'd say overall, what we heard was lots of very strong support for the project. So, can I answer any questions about the plans or the feedback.
Okay, well, Mark, thank you very much. Let's go to questions from council. Councilor Nosler-Beck.
Is this on? I don't think the green light's working.
Nice and close.
But here I am. My kids who are 5 and 7 will probably be really mad at me if they ever watch this, but I know that they would be in favor of the water feature. But I just think about that space and how my family uses it right now. And, you know, we can have all the activities under the sun going on in that area, and my kids still end up at Stevens Playground. I do love the water feature, but in Colorado, you know, if this is where trunk or treat's going to be or in that space, I think that a playground is probably better suited for year-round use. And so I saw that on that there were some, you know, rocks and some other things that we could potentially do. Overall, I like option A better, but particularly because of how we use that space and the playground. So just wanted to put that out there with our feedback. But it sounds like everybody's as torn as my family will be in that space too.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mark, for the presentation and all your work on this. It's exciting to have two great options, so there's no bad option in front of us. I would have to agree with Councilor Nosler-Beck. I love water features, and my inner child is mad at me for saying this, and I will be accountable to Coco and Talia. But when I think about the purpose of the space, I realize that the drive for this was we see it as a community gathering space, and that events are an important aspect of it. But 98% of the time, it's not going to be programmed with specific events, and rather be a placemaking place on our main street. And so when I was looking at, what could be used the most amount of time by the most diversity of people, water feature does not hit that. Water feature is sexy on paper, and it's nice when someone else is maintaining it and you happen to be there on a warm day wearing the right thing to play. But the water feature, it's expensive. I do know that they tend to break and be expensive both to install and maintain. Especially to take up a significant amount of the space. And I also prefer concept A. I think originally I got really excited about B because it just felt more unique, but at the end of the day, concept A is really opening the space up more to our main street. It's a bigger performance area, and the west-facing stage is it's pretty intense sun when the sun's setting there, so when it is being used for performance, I think the general layout of concept A kind of works better. And I think it works better for specific performances, but also just for, as Nosler-Beck was saying, for how we use it when we're just there for dinner or, killing some time waiting for pizza or whatever. So I feel like that plan that opens it up to 38th more is going to draw people in. It's going to, be more apparent what it is. And I like the play equipment. I think, kids, as a parent, my kid's 16, so he's probably not going to climb on it. But, I just remember when he was younger, we would seek out places that had play equipment across the street. So, like, after dinner, he could go run around and, we could enjoy a little time out of the house. So I like that element to have the playground. The other thing I just want to comment on, I think whatever the ultimate design is, we should really be capitalizing on gateway art at both ends of the park, because we'll have people kind of seeing it from both directions, but we really want it to be a space that's inviting people in. And I think overall, both concepts are really thinking about, people wanting to pass through, stay, have festivals, but at the end of the day, I really like concept A kind of feeling more like our Main Street space. So it's going to be nicer than the dead grass that we've been enjoying the last couple of years. Thank you.
Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I like both of these designs quite a bit. I'm going to have to disagree a little bit on the water feature just because before I moved to Wheat Ridge, I was in an area that had a water feature and we spent a significant amount of time there, even though my big girls were in preteens age. But for me, the reason why I think that we shouldn't have a water feature is because I don't think that with all of the drought that we've been seeing in Colorado for so long, I know that at one point there were a lot of fountains, city fountains and things like that in other municipalities around us that were turned off for the summer because of drought. And so I don't think it's a responsible use of our resources as much as I really love it. Not a huge fan of the sculptural playground either, but I do think that we need to have something that is an active space for our youth that's near our businesses on 38th. And I do like Plan A, the way it opens up to 38th Avenue. One question, so I would really lean towards Plan A, even though it breaks my heart to not have a water feature. I just don't think that it's responsible of us. But one question I had is, when you guys were doing the initial stakeholder meetings, I like way back in 2018, did you have some of the property owners along 38th Avenue and business owners in those stakeholder meetings? Great, thank you.
If I can just address real quick the water feature, this is not trying to advocate one way or the other, but typically those are a recirculating system. So it's not taking potable water and just dumping it down the drain. It's a recirculating that is cleaned and reused. So it's not as much water use as you may think, but point taken.
Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I think Town Center Park, which is the park we're trying to replace, part of the problem with what was a water fountain that never worked, right? And I know there's a park in Arvada that's got a great water feature that mostly never works. So I agree. I think option A looks really good. As somebody who has a business that would probably want to use that stage quite a bit, it would be good if it's not looking directly into the sun right at the time you'd want to use it. So I like the stage that faces 38th Avenue. I also like that the promenade area or whatever it is goes around. So when you set up booths and things like that, there's kind of a natural flow to it. So yeah, I agree. I think option A looks really good.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark, for these two concepts. I kind of see the pushing and pulling of trying to, get a consensus of, adding a fire pit, adding the playgrounds, and seeing kind of what we want. And so as I'm looking at A, the one concept, it's a little more symmetrical. Is that promenade, is that like a one-way for vehicle traffic for the food trucks?
It wouldn't have to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because definitely on the B, I have a little concern I would assume it would be a one-way and you'd be coming at High Court and then you'd enter onto that with the food truck because it's so close to that intersection. So it would be a one-way going from east to west and perhaps on both. But definitely on the A, I like the fact that the stage is, I'm okay with it being symmetrical, and I understand the other one is definitely asymmetrical. But I like the fact that I agree with the other council members that I'm a little concerned. I've been on the green, in the summertime or kind of late in the fall, and that sun is setting, and I understand there's that new building on the west. I haven't really been in that space recently to watch a movie screen. But generally, when we would have movies out there, the movie screen was on the west side, and we were on the east side, and it was getting kind of dark. So I have some reservations that, if the movie screen you're looking east, that you may not be able to see that as much. And the user has less options, meaning with the one on A, you can sit like directly north-south, you could sit from the east or west, you can kind of move wherever you want, and it really doesn't matter what time of day it is, you have a lot of options. And so I kind of prefer that. The playground, I see the playground. The playgrounds are great. In the past, the kids that have attended events here, they generally would go and use the Stevens Elementary playgrounds. And so if there is a playground, I understand that this is a shared area, that perhaps maybe some of the kids from the school may not use this playground quite as much, might be a little more equal. If there's a water fountain, they absolutely will be encouraged to come to that water fountain area. And I do have some concerns as a parent that proximity of the water fountains, I would be a little nervous that I'm kind of getting into watching something and then my kids are like at the water fountain and now 38th is really close. So that makes a little bit of a safety issue in my mind. Do you know, and then, do you know, I have a couple questions. One, there's a lot of seat walls and they don't have backs, and some of our residents, they kind of need the backs. Would that be a possibility that you could have, and I totally get we could switch, you know, a certain percentage where we'd have some benches with backs. You're nodding your head yes, so I'll move on to the next question. In B, are the lounge chairs permanently fixed or are those movable?
They can be either way.
Okay.
You can mount them, or they could just be placed there.
Yeah, hopefully no one would wander off with them, but I do know that a lot of people like chairs. They can kind of move, maybe because of the sun orientation, they kind of move them around a little bit.
Yep.
And then what type of material in that lounge chair area, this is on B, in the picnic area, would that be ADA? My question is would those be ADA accessible?
Yes, all the pavement would be accessible, so that
Okay.
could likely be crushed granite, be something
Yeah.
like that.
And then, and thank you everybody for your patience as I'm asking all these questions. And then on the option A, I'm not quite sold on the fire pit. I understand that's a focal point.
Mhm.
I would definitely support some type of sculpture. Perhaps it could even be a sculpture that has some type of movement, whether it's wind, a little bit of water. But I also see that as potentially an ADA accessible viewing area for the concert, which would be great.
Sure.
Where you could, people would come in, wheelchairs and stuff, and they're like, hey, you can see this concert. This is very equitable. And so I like that. I don't really see that as much on the other option. You wouldn't really be able to sit, like dead center. You'd have to be kind of off on the side. And then just looking at, I kind of wrote down real quick, I'm not going to repeat them, but I kind of looked at, which ones really hit the highest marks. And it was definitely like the water feature had a lot of votes for it. I know that the Alvada Library has a water feature. I've taken my kids there when they're little. I know that Discovery Park has a small water feature that we have. And so we do have one tiny one. I understand that sometimes there can be maintenance. I could go either way on the water feature, as long as it was, a good design. And I've seen a lot of good designs on water features that to try to recycle some of the water. If it was left or not left, I do know that playgrounds are really, really important. And so having some type of playground, whatever that is, just so it's not the typical, I don't know if it needs to be sculptural, but just so it's not the typical, there's a lot of interesting playgrounds out there. But I kind of like where you're going with that. I think I'm going to leave the rest of my questions and see if anybody, and the last thing is, I know there's been talk in the past about porta potties versus permanent structures. And in my opinion is that, and I've seen both, is that the permanent ones tend to be very costly to construct, and they're really costly to maintain because you have freezing temperatures. And so I'm definitely in favor of having, I call them porta potties, but that in some type of enclosure, because then it could be on a weekly schedule or on call. If you have a major event, we can add more or have it changed more. So I'm definitely in favor of having that put in. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is surrounding, are we sold on like one concept or the other, or is this kind of like we'll pick and choose what we like the best out of both and combine them?
Yeah, I think that's really what we were asking from the public as well, is we're trying to get a sense for what elements people really want to see there. I think there's some things that would be hard to sort of SWOT plan to plan, but for the most part, yes, we're just looking
Okay.
for.
So I agree with my colleagues in the preferred concept being concept A. I really like the opening of the space and the sculptural playground. Is our water feature even operational at Discovery? Because I don't,
Discovery? It should be at Discovery, yeah.
Okay.
Town Center, no, but Discovery, yes.
okay. Because anytime we've gone to Discovery in this summer, it's never been on. So, yeah, I just didn't know if it was operational at all.
Yeah, Karen.
You have to stop on it.
Karen O'Donnell's on Zoom too, if she might be able to speak to it. But I know there were some issues occasionally with ditch water and, because it's a non-potable, I think, water feature that's just, there was some issues, I think, maybe last summer. But I don't know if Karen, you're still listening.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, we've had just some minor mechanical issues and it's been closed for short periods of time, but in general, it opens Memorial Day weekend and it's open throughout the summer.
Okay. I would say my preference would be for a playground that could be used year-round, considering we have events during the fall and the winter. I also agree, I don't really like the west-facing amphitheater, so the one where it's more central, I would say is preferred. I do really like the grove in concept B, though. I really like the trees, like the natural shade concept with that. And my other question about concept A would be surrounding the fireplace. Like, how would that work? Would it be on a timer? In theory, it sounds like a great idea, but in practicality, I don't foresee it being an added value feature.
Yeah, so I think, we've been looking at fire pits that are in ski areas, as sort of a good kind of baseline to use for those. So I think it's a very good question about how does that turn on? Does somebody have to come turn it on? Is it on a timer? There are ways to do those. I've seen several that have an enclosure that fully encloses the fire, but you can still see into the fire. So I think there's certainly ways to do it. We just have to work out what those are.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, and thanks for all the comments that have come before. I agree with everybody, and I'm learning a lot about kids and water features. I actually, just to have a different perspective since I don't have kids, I really like Concept 1. I started out liking Concept 2 because it had all these neat spaces, but I think that in Wheat Ridge we have these amazing parks with all these neat spaces where you can hang out. And this is an opportunity to have this sort of classic promenade park. And I think that's and it's in a really cool space where we can do that kind of thing. So I really like the idea of Concept 1. And just to sort of respond to the fire pit, I actually have spent a lot of time at the fire pits at some of these ski resorts, and I think they can be really, really neat gatherers of people if safely done, and is fun for kids and adults if safely done. So I would encourage us to see if those options were possible. And I also really like, especially since we have the apartments and things that are at, nearer to Wadsworth, I really like the game space. I think that's a wonderful addition that just a little piece of urban parks that I don't know if we have here in Wheat Ridge of being able to go play ping pong and things like that. Though to Ms. Dozman's comment, I would love to see that be just a little bit more shaded, because when I saw the grove of the other concept, I was really drawn towards sort of that shady area and thought maybe that would be, the game area might be a place to have the grove and a game area. So, thanks.
Great. Councilor Hutchinson.
It's on. Yeah, I have some questions, actually. This isn't Wheat Ridge property, so what is the agreement with Jeffco Schools?
Sure, we've been in discussions with the schools for quite some time on this, and actually just met with them again this afternoon. And right now, they're proposing a 50-year lease for the city, long-term. And we're still working out the details, but the city would most likely manage and maintain the park and program it. And anybody in the community can use it, of course, and any school could actually use it too if they wanted to use the outdoor amphitheater for classroom space. But yeah, long-term 50-year lease.
So that's down from 99.
Yeah, I think originally,
heard.
a couple of years ago, they did,
Yeah.
they were looking at 99, but the last proposal they gave us was a 50-year lease, and it's very similar to a lease they have with the city of Arvada. They have a very similar project in Arvada where school property is used for a community park like this.
Okay, and what would the price tag be for the city to be paying to Jeffco schools?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Yes.
How's that a lease?
$1 a year, probably, maybe. There might be something in there, but yeah, no fee that we're aware of. Maybe there's a de minimis.
Okay.
But yeah, we haven't had any, they haven't mentioned any fee for use.
So I know with declining enrollment, what if the school closes? What if the school wants to sell the property? How much is Wheat Ridge putting into this? for
Well, we'd have a
money?
50-year lease, so they couldn't get out of the lease. We would have it for 50 years. If the school closed, I mean, they'd have to honor that lease. If they enter into a lease with us, whoever
But
they
they
sell the
own
property
the
to.
property.
Well, they couldn't sell that portion of it at the time unless they want to back out on their lease. And so that's why a 50-year lease agreement is a good deal, because, yeah, the city would invest significant amount of money into this, and we want to make sure that we have it in for a very long time.
Well, one thing I'm interested in is where is the front door of the school from this new concept? Because it's hard to see.
Mhm.
Really, that doesn't even look like the school to me.
Yep. I can bring that up here. So the front door is actually up here.
Yep.
All of these walks are leading right to the front door.
Okay. So I drove by the school in Arvada that they have the same type of an agreement. Next to the school there, I don't know the name of it. This is when one of these public meetings were going on. It's like a park. Just I don't think it's like, it's not set up like this. It's kind of like a park. And the school's on a corner. You drive down the streets. From each street, you can see the front door of the school. And I think that's a safety issue. I don't know of schools around so much that you can't see the front door of a school. So, you know, the front door would be off of like High.
Yes. it's
But you
directly
wouldn't
down
be
High.
able to see it off of 38th.
You can't see it much today either with the trees. And the school's 100% on board with this. And their priority for this project is to get a new parking lot with better circulation for their kids. This actually provides a much safer drop-off for parents and kids and a much closer direct route to the front door.
Yeah, and I'm just surprised that Jeffco Schools has money to do a new parking lot. That parking lot is fine. It's the same number of parking spaces. It's just relocated. And, you know, the schools say they don't have money for different things, but they can just do a parking lot because we want to do the green.
No, the parking lot has been a priority for them for years, even before we've been talking about the green. They have the money now because they have a bond, and they have $800,000 committed to this project. That's part of the bond that they have out.
Oh, yeah, it's too bad they didn't do it when they redid the school. So I do have concerns about the water feature. I know about recycling of the water. I have a fountain. You still have to add water to it, but also it's ditch water. We're not going to have water in the ditches all the time. I saw the irrigation ditch by my house, and it had like a lot of water in it, like today and stuff, but, you know, we just don't have water, and that just seems kind of out there to do that. And also with a fire pit, to me, is also a safety issue. That means somebody from the city or whatever has to be there to be watching what's going on. And it just seems like a risk. You know, every day we have a fire alert because everything is so dry. But then I look at all the trees. It looks like all the trees that are there now will be removed. It'll take a long time for trees to get as big as what they are there now, unless you're going to plant, 20-foot trees. That's a lot of money. So those are, I have been to Edgewater. They also have a park area where they show films, and they have entertainment. People bring chairs and or blankets. They sit on the grass, and they have food trucks there. I don't think they spent like a whole lot of money to do it, and it's packed whenever they have something going on. So I just wonder about how much money is being spent for this. Is this a want or a need? Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go around on round two, all of the councilors have had a chance to talk. I want to have, pardon me, had a few things that I wanted to talk about. I sort of in general like Plan B a little bit better. I've had some comments that the music coming out of the band shell may be sort of objectionable to the neighbors to the west. So if I was going to sort of redo the plan, would maybe turn that a little bit further towards the north and put it at an angle at the corner there. I think the promenade, the sort of sweeping promenade on the B plan is stronger, and I like the shade structure connected with, and there's the water feature, or perhaps the play structure could go in that area, but together so that you can do it. I understand the sort of the problems with water features because they break down. They're good for 90 days during the summer, the good weather, and then they drop off. But I have concerns sort of about the fire pit. Perhaps Councilor Ohm said, might there be another kind of feature that was sort of had interest to it and longevity and stuff. I think the Grove area on Plan B is really strong. I think the crusher finds are really great. Reminds me about being in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. I think all of the furniture should be fixed in place because I think if it isn't, we won't have them for as long as we want them. On Plan B, I think, or on Plan A, I like the type of play structure, if that could be incorporated into the other plan. I think that's good, and I think sort of a robust area kind of out of the way for the Sanilet facilities and that sort of thing would be important. So those are kind of my thoughts. And going down the list from our councilors, we have Councilor Nosler-Beck coming up next.
Just there's some components to the green that currently we use all the time, and it's kind of to Councilor Hutchinson's point as well. Just we do the Christmas tree lighting there. Would those kind of monuments that we have now in our city, those trees, would those be preserved and a part of this plan? Is that possible?
It's probably not. So it's something that we looked at. It's a very small site to try to fit all of these different components into. The streetscape itself is enough to sort of make it challenging to keep those trees in place. But right now, I think the trees that are on site right now would be removed as part of this.
And then
Probably, if I could add on that, those trees are not doing very well at all. The one we use for Christmas, it probably doesn't have much life left in it anyway. Probably most of those on the front of 38th Avenue are pretty close to their useful life. So I think it provides that opportunity to maybe do something a little different for holiday lighting, in this space. I don't think we could use those trees much longer.
Okay, and that kind of goes into my next question, which is just with the, actual landscape materials that we're using. I would be really hopeful that we're utilizing this opportunity to use more drought-friendly plantings and, a big swath of green grass. From my limited understanding of landscaping and water usage isn't necessarily the best use of a space. And so how do we have a green, because that's what it's called, but make sure that we're doing it in the most, drought-friendly way, because that's where we're headed.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on that. We would absolutely be wanting to use xeric plants, drought-tolerant plants, for all of the landscaping. In terms of bluegrass lawns, typically in park design, we're only using bluegrass for features that really need to be bluegrass. So sports fields, I think a civic lawn like this is a reasonable use of that. If we think about something like synthetic turf, that gets really hot and probably not a great place for people to be sitting. So this bluegrass lawn is also smaller than the lawn that's there now, so we'd be overall reducing water use pretty significantly on the site.
Great, and it would be really great to see, at least for some of for constituents, for me to be able to go back and say that it's this much less of an area, just to, if we could get that percentage, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just a couple quick comments, and then I just want to ask, so are you looking for consensus on specific elements, or is this type of just general topical feedback what you're looking for?
What do you think? I think we're getting pretty good consensus on some of the different features that we can come back with a final design. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, it sounds to me like we're leaning toward Plan A as sort of the foundation for this. And yeah, I agree. I think we have close to consensus on a lot of these elements and some that are iffy, so maybe there's a couple things we can have some options as we come back.
Okay, well, I'll share a couple comments, and then I'll share kind of what I've heard and not ask for a consensus, but if it's not consistent with what you guys are hearing, you can let me know.
We've got more comments coming, so.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not asking for a
okay.
consensus. I'm just sharing out what I think I've heard. But first, a couple of comments I have. So for the playground, we do have a really great playground at Stevens. And I actually used to do consulting work for GOCO grants for playgrounds. And a couple things that consistently came up again and again when we were doing community outreach with those, and I know this is your wheelhouse too, but nature play where it's less structural and it's just like rocks logs they can climb up and over is very popular and keeps kids plenty busy, and can look really nice with the one of the criteria that was set forth of having the aesthetic that's consistent with Wheat Ridge. Another piece of feedback that we got all the time with playgrounds was making sure that there is seating for parents while their kids play, and so it's an important element. One of the other pieces that we fortunately got to play with, literally got to play with, were some of these just big sort of abstract, like big movable pieces that kids could kind of just creatively like move around and play with. We've talked about environmental responsibility through like the landscaping and the water, and I absolutely agree with that. The other thing, looking at concept A, or really sort of generally just trees over plants would be, I think what we're hearing is wanting to invest in shade. And we do have, if we're envisioning people running around, especially with festivals, it's hard to keep kids off of like not running through landscaping. So something to consider. And then my last question is for Patrick on the 50-year lease. Would there be a first right of refusal should the district decide to sell their property? I mean, I know the lease would be standing, but
Yeah, we could ask for that. Sorry, I haven't looked at that. We do have a draft. I haven't looked at it in quite some time. And I don't know if that's in there right now, but we can ask for that.
Okay, all right. I know that there's a lot of examples beyond Arvada of this co-locating using land efficiently. So to not have to pay for the land and get the park is a pretty sweet deal. So lastly, I just want to share kind of generally what I've been hearing on some of these things, and I know there's more comments. I'm not asking for consensus. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not done, so. So in general, I'm hearing like concept A generally, I think generally hearing no on the water feature, increase in shade, people like the Grove, play area, play structure, whatever that looks like. The fire pit has some hesitation, so looking at like different possibilities there. And then people like the game element for adults. So again, not asking for consensus, but those are just elements that I've heard kind of creeping up.
Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my next questions, since I think most everything has been addressed, is what do we anticipate the overall cost being? And how much investment are other stakeholders adding? So Jeffco schools, for example.
Sure. It's kind of a range right now. It's anywhere between 4 and 5 million, I think. We don't, of course, won't have final numbers until final design's done, but those were the numbers that we've been throwing around. Mark, is that correct? Yep. And right now the city has 3.8 million budgeted. So it's not quite enough, but as I mentioned earlier, the Parks Department, Karen and Brandon are applying for a grant. We think we have a pretty good chance of maybe another $500,000 to $700,000. The school district is putting in $800,000. That's pretty much what the parking lot portion would cost. We have about $877,000 that has been reserved from fees in lieu of park dedication that the apartments at 38th and Upham and then the apartments on Wadsworth have provided. 1.2 million in open space dollars, and we put about 800,000 in from the general fund back in 2017. We've been holding those funds for this purpose. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. And then Town Center Park, if we could sell that parcel, we have no idea what it's worth. But any funds, any revenues from a sale of Town Center Park could be put into this development.
Thank you. I have Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to revisit the fire pit real fast and just ask if you can potentially give us some more details on, I would hate to lose that piece because, you know, we are really putting a lot of direction towards family orientation, but we do have a lot of residents that don't necessarily, aren't necessarily parent or child space driven. And so I think that piece gives us some balance. And so can you talk about maybe how that space could be safe and if it would be like on a timer or, you know, give us a little more information about that?
Yeah, again, I think we'd need to look into some details about how we would have that function. They're used in public spaces at ski areas all over the place. So I think there's a good precedent there in a way that we can use those safely. So we could bring back some images of what some of those look like, but I'm confident that we can have something that is safe and adds to sort of a four-season use of the park.
And when looking at that and the size and the massing, maybe just keeping in mind what Councilmember Ohm brought forward about that being maybe a flexible ADA space for them to be able to enjoy, you know, directly across from the stage. And then another thing that I don't see in either of these concepts is if we, you know, are losing our big evergreen that we use, and a lot of communities use other things like, you know, large big trees for lighting, and they look nice too, but where would that placement go? And so maybe just kind of keeping in mind of with the way the landscape, the sidewalk promenade that faces 38th Avenue would there really be some sort of place that we could utilize as kind of a flex space to be able to do that? I know that our community really enjoys that, and so I'd really hate to lose that piece.
We need a Christmas tree. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it safe to say that the water feature would probably be like a high-ticket item value?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. And then what approximate reduction of turf grass is there with either concept, like just roughly compared to the existing turf we have now? Is it like a 50% roughly?
I think it's actually a little bit more than that. I think I'd have to go back and double check. I think it's close to an acre of bluegrass that's out there right now.
And it's probably like Kentucky bluegrass too,
Yep.
huge water user.
Mhm.
And so I know you didn't get into specifics, but you were talking about bluegrass. You weren't talking about Kentucky bluegrass. You were talking about some other variety.
Yes.
Because I know like the sports fields are more like a tall fescue.
Exactly.
Okay, which
Yep.
is deep roots and water saving. And then, would you say, what type of water user are the spruce trees generally? High water user, low water user?
Spruce trees?
Yeah.
They're on the higher side, but I don't think it's, I wouldn't say that it's not a good idea to have those. I mean, I think it's okay to have spruce trees.
Okay, and then, do you know, I've seen some down trees, evergreen trees, sometimes. How do generally our spruce trees, the ones that fall down in like the high winds,
Oh.
as far as shallow rooting or deep rooting?
No, typically they've got pretty wide roots, so yeah, they've held up pretty well.
If I know that a lot of people do like having the evergreen trees to light. Please consider that if you do a signature permanent evergreen tree placement, that it's just not shading any pedestrian walkways, meaning that it's not planted on the south side, so that we don't have any icing issues. But yeah, I would like to see some, if possible, where that might go. But yeah, just please consider that.
Sure.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks.
Counselor Nosler-Beck.
Can you explain how the parking lot works? Is the parking lot, I understand how a parking lot works, but like who uses the parking lot and how that is kind of defined, especially if it's shared with Stevens? Like, how does this work, especially if it's a public space, and, just how that goes down?
Sure. The school district's fairly flexible today for us to use the parking spaces after hours, school hours. But of course, during school hours, they don't prefer that and won't allow it. So anybody using, I think, during the daytime, during school hours, using the space passively, need to walk, bike, or park on the street. We have street parking on Upham and High, and some on 38th.
And so in this concept B, but could we look at concept A?
Yep.
I was just looking at it, and so that's not like a bus roundabout, like area there. Like, they would still use High Court for the bus drop-off?
They would still use High Court.
Okay. And then the other thing I just wanted to throw out there is, as we're looking to this space, just making sure that we're planning for the future, this would be a great opportunity to place some EV charging stations, if there's any of those funds out there for that type of thing in the parking lot there. And then also, I know that there's some work going on land acknowledgement components in the community, and this is an opportunity that I just don't want to pass by with that. So, thanks.
Just to be clear, the parking lot will essentially be a separate project in its school parking lot. So we could.
So I should talk to Jeffco about.
Yes, we could
EV
talk to them
charging
about
stations?
putting
Okay.
in EV stations, but.
Happy to.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things too. If we can keep the fire feature like a fire pit, I think that's a really nice community gathering, conversation place to have. So if we can do something with that, and I think like you said with ski resorts, there's plenty of safe ways to do that I think will look really cool and be a nice conversation place. The more shade we can put, if we're looking at option A, towards the game area, so even a shade structure or just more trees, that kind of seems like a good place maybe for a large pine tree or something in there. I don't know. And then I do like that the playground is on high and back towards the school and not so like the water feature in option B is closer to 38th, which as a parent, that's pretty scary. So I do like that it's back further and it's just much easier to keep track of the kids as well. So I think that's it. I do also appreciate that this project was put together with multiple funding sources and a lot of it came from other sources other than the city. So that's pretty good. So.
Thank you, Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. I would like to ask for consensus to move forward to 90% plan for the green and using the feedback that's been provided tonight. Is that good enough? Do we have consensus for that?
Okay, well, we have unanimous consensus to move forward. Very good.
Great, thank you very much. That's great input this evening, and we'll get started.
Okay,
Sounds
Mark,
good.
thank you very much for a
Thanks,
great
Mark. Thank you.
presentation. We look forward to this project coming back. This will be a great addition to our city. We will move now to agenda item number 2. This is residential bulk plane. Mr. Goff.
Yes, switching gears a little bit. Talking about hard structures now, but Lauren Mikulak is pulling up her presentation, and she will be presenting this evening. Mr. Johnstone is here to help answer questions.
Alrighty. Good evening. For the record, Lauren Mikulak, Planning Manager. And I'm happy to be here to talk about bulk plane again. Hopefully make it exciting, more exciting. We were in almost this exact place 1 year ago. And at that point in time, we didn't have a consensus in terms of how to proceed except to just bring the topic back later. And frankly, I think it's really benefited from this holding period in a few different ways. First, we've gained some additional public input and just been able to gauge public sentiment through the Let's Talk program. So we provided that data point in the memo, and it demonstrates that the public continues to be more supportive than not of expanding bulk plane. The benefit of another year has given us several additional examples of homes that have complied with the bulk plane regulations, and that's what we included in that attachment to the memo. Those are excerpts from building permits, real building permits that show how applicants have had to demonstrate their compliance. And then lastly, this elapsed time has really given our zoning team the chance to analyze the topic and present our recommendations slightly differently, but hopefully in a more visual way. So I have a couple slides that mimic the graphics in your packet just for our viewing audience. We've talked about this a lot, so I think you know by now that bulk plane is that diagonal limit on construction, and having that impact can mean three things as a building gets taller. It either forces an increased setback, forces an upper story to have an increased setback, or it forces the roof to be a peak design instead of a flat roof. Sometimes it's just one of those things, and sometimes it's a combination. Again, you saw that sort of single or combined approach in that attachment too. In prior discussions, we've looked at these two images. You've probably seen those a few times. Those are some of the earlier tall buildings in East Wheat Ridge. The bottom two are some of the examples from your packets, again, real-life examples. The other thing to note about all of these images is that they're detached single-family, or what we're now calling single-unit homes. We're not talking about duplexes. We're not talking about multi-unit structures because the code already has larger setbacks or upper story step backs for those kinds of structures.
So, as you know, currently bulk plan applies to single-unit homes in R1C and R3. It's been the case now for 5 years already. Time has flown. And that means that we are currently applying bulk plan to a quarter of all residentially zoned parcels. We are still recommending that the bulk plan applies citywide, but we also brought tonight an alternate approach, and I'll walk you through some of those graphics. So you saw on page 4 of the memo, you've got the summary table of our 8 residential zone districts. And the image below that is this on the screen, figure 5. It's the prototypical single unit lots in all of those districts. We took the minimum width and the minimum area, scaled that out, drew the minimum setback. So in this image, the gray shading is the setback and the yellow is the developable area. And what this really highlights is while we have 8 zone districts, we only actually have 5 prototypical lots for single unit homes. And furthermore, all but 2 of the districts have a minimum side setback of 5 feet. So when you look at it from this standpoint, what we are recommending as staff at a minimum is that the bulk plan apply to those 6 zone districts where the minimum setback is 5 feet. On the next page of your memo and on this slide, we then looked at bulk plan from a 3-dimensional standpoint. Figures 6 and 7 compare now the buildable volume on those lots, first without and then with the bulk plan. And the 3 lots on the right show that bulk plan clearly has an effect on the development envelope when there's a 5-foot side setback. And as you look at this series, sort of backwards from right to left, you can see that the impact is diminishing as that setback increases. So R1A, that second image, has a 10-foot side setback. R1 has a 15-foot setback. But the presence of that angled plane in all 5 images on the bottom there in figure 7 shows that bulk plane could have an impact on a 3-story structure in all residential zone districts. While we're on this image, I should also note that our current bulk plane regulations do apply to all sides of a property, but the front setbacks, which are on the bottom of the image, are so large that the bulk plane angle never comes into effect. That's why you don't see an angled plane parallel to that front property line. And it's hard with this angle, but if we spun the model, you would see that it does apply on the rear setbacks too. So in terms of our recommendations, as I mentioned, we do recommend at a minimum that we apply bulk plane to those 6 districts that have the 5-foot setback. I think it would help achieve the sort of community goals of neighborhood compatibility and address some of the concerns that we hear and you probably hear about privacy and light and massing when these homes get taller. If we take that approach, we would cover about 3/4 of all residentially zoned properties in the city. We're still also presenting a recommendation of applying citywide, and there are a few reasons that we outlined in the memo. First, as you saw from this image, it does have an impact in all zone districts if there were a 3-story structure at the minimum setback. Second, we know that every zone district in our city has non-conforming structures, and that means that we have homes in every zone district that are outside of this yellow envelope and encroach into the setbacks. And the way the code is written now is that if they wanted to do an upper story, they could build at that closer setback. So allowing bulk plan to apply citywide would prevent upper story additions on non-conforming setbacks to be that close to the property line. Third, from a messaging and communication standpoint, we think it's just a little more clear and straightforward for customers when we apply citywide. I think most people don't know their zoning, they don't know their neighbor's zoning, so they aren't really discerning sort of where visually or practically speaking this would apply or not. And then lastly, the ADU ordinance that you just had a study session for, that proposes bulk plan applying to detached ADUs in all residential zone districts. So again, could help for clarity that we just apply bulk plan to all new structures in all residential zone districts. So before you tonight are sort of the 2 options that we are bringing back, the minimum recommendation and the citywide recommendation, and Ken and I are here to discuss and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll open it up for questions. Start with Mr. Ohm.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mayor. So the first question is on the, does the bulk plan apply to the rear setback?
Yes.
Okay. And then does it, when you say all residential districts, does that also imply mixed-use neighborhood, which would have townhomes, for instance?
No. So we have not contemplated the mixed-use districts. It would apply only to single-unit detached structures, so what we've been calling single-family homes. Wouldn't apply to duplex or multi-unit because there's bigger setbacks for those structures in all of the zone districts, including mixed-use.
Because what I've heard specifically is in my district, I have had some instances of the single-family home, but there's a lot of concern over the developments that are coming in with the townhomes and their proximity
Sure.
of towering over their backyard.
Sure. Some of the projects that I think you're talking about, so in the mixed-use code, when we have townhomes, there's a residential separation or transition, and usually that setback is 15 to 20 feet. So the bulk plane, even if applied, wouldn't have an effect because they're already having to be a 20-foot setback. Now, a 3-story building at a 20-foot setback still feels tall, but the bulk plane would not have an impact in that fact pattern.
Okay. And then on page 31 of the packet, I've had some constituents ask me, that building, that house, the house looks too tall, and I tell them, well, the max height is 35 feet height.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at page 31, and I'm looking at the garage elevation of 92, and then it shows the roof plan of 129. That appears to be 37 feet height difference, plus the additional peak, so it could roughly be 39 feet, not 35 feet.
Are you looking, I don't have the full packet pages. Are you on example D? Oh, page 12. Thank you. Perfect. Yes. So the definition of building height in Wheat Ridge for decades has been to the top of a flat roof or the midpoint of a peaked roof. So the upper peak is allowed to exceed that. It happens periodically, not often. But that is how the definition has been written for. I went back to the 2001 code this morning, and I didn't have the older codes at my fingertips, but I'm pretty sure it's been that way potentially since the beginning.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
The beginning.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that short and very helpful presentation. That was really good. We had a question earlier about grading differences,
Yes.
and I guess if someone really wants to pack the dirt in before they sell their property, I don't think we can do much about that. But I am curious, when you've got a property that's on a grade where the lot line on one side is higher than the lot line on the other, so how would this apply? Because there are hills in our city.
Yes.
I ride my bike. I know there's a lot of hills. So how would that apply? And then how do you take a look at that for construction when, if they're digging out and it's going to be, well, I mean, I know it's the box, but like, how do you measure it when the box is uneven at the ends?
Yep. I went back through our notes from 2015, 2016, when we did the moratorium, when we adopted the code as it is today, and we actually had extensive conversation on grades and sort of how we measure with our existing height, building height definition, and how we regulate it in the bulk plane section in the code today is actually more restrictive than we used to be before we had bulk plane. And it explicitly says that bulk plane is measured from the existing average grade of a lot. Average grade shall be calculated as the average of the elevations taken at the midpoint of each property line. And we included a graphic that shows how that has to be calculated, so that sort of dots if it's a rectangle in the middle. And we receive that image in our building permit plan sets. In the same way that you see excerpts from showing the bulk plane and elevation view, we have to receive those grade points on the property line. So it's been working. The other thing is that it says existing average grade. We don't issue grading permits prior to the development of a single unit home, so folks can't be doing that work before they've gotten all of this data and documentation reviewed and approved.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that I'm really supportive of us taking the recommendation of the city and taking this to all residential zone districts. I just think it's a great step towards some of the rifts that we've seen with housing in the city, and it really gives people more faith in our planning process. So thank you, and I'm highly supportive of this. Thanks.
Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am in support of this. I was in support of it the first time it went around for it to go in all zone districts. This is kind of how we welcome development into our community, but also maintain the unique character of our community and our neighbors prior. And when you look at the map, the reason why I think it ended up in R1C and R3, and that was all that everybody could agree on at the time, is because it really was coming out of some development that was happening in the southeast corner of Wheat Ridge, where they're all tiny lots, and there were a lot of very large amassing of homes being done down there. At the time, staff recommended for it to be citywide, and they are still recommending for it to be citywide. Well, I would recommend that we do it citywide in all 8 R series zone districts, as it was requested in the memo. And again, this is a really great way for us to be able to have new great development in our community, and also keep our neighbors and neighborhoods unique.
Councilor Stites.
I agree with Ms. Weaver and Ms. Hoppy completely. I think that we had a District 3 meeting a couple months ago, and it started out very tenuous, and the moment we got on bulk plane, every single person in the meeting was kind of for it. Couldn't remember the name of it, so I just started going like this, and everybody kind of got it, and so that was kind of cool. But yeah, I agree. I think that going with staff's recommendation is probably the best way to go on this, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree that this should be citywide and all the residential zones do the same thing. And I just want some clarification as far as where the measurement goes for the bulk plane. Is it measured like 15 feet up from like a side of a property or something? To where, see the angle on the right? 45 degrees or so there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should have clarified that. So that has been how we've measured it. There was some discussion back in 2015, 2016, should it be 13 feet, 15 feet, 17 feet? Where we've landed is that it's 15 feet up on the property line and then a 45-degree angle until it meets where the maximum building height would be. So you're exactly right, 15 feet and then 45 degrees.
Okay, so when that measurement occurs, a lot of this, tons of this has been going on in East Wheat Ridge. So when does the measurement happen? Is it before a developer scrapes a house? Is it like with a survey? Because developers can bring in dirt and put on property and things like that. So when is the measurement of the 15 feet done?
So it's documented when they come in for permit, but because they're not allowed to be doing, house might get demolished, but we don't issue grading permits to single unit properties to be doing that scope of construction prior to getting a new building permit. So it's sort of the existing condition essentially that you would see today.
It should be,
Yes.
or it needs to be?
The code says that it is that way, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Noslerback.
I just wanted to say that I'm in full support of this and making it citywide, and just throwing out that I did hear from at least a couple of my neighbors over on the west side of Wheat Ridge that they were in support of this as well. So just wanted to make that heard.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So how extensive is this issue in areas other than where it's already been implemented? I mean, are you hearing a lot of concerns of community members in these other zone districts? Are you having people come to planning that would build beyond the bulk plane that may be an issue?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to measure what the impact could have been. I mean, there are now taller homes being built throughout the city. So we do get calls, when somebody's neighbor is popping a top and they're asking, can I see those plans? How tall is that going to be? What we don't do at this moment is say, would it have been different if bulk plane applied? But I do think given the way that the market has shifted in the last 5 years and the development and types of permits that we're seeing, I think it could potentially have an impact further west than where it originally was an issue.
Lauren, I had a question. What is the difference between residential 3, R3, and R3a?
They're just, there's not a lot of difference as it relates to, well, let me pull up my table before I answer you, hang on. Yes, as you see in the table, not a lot of difference as it relates to the single unit development, but when it gets to multi-unit development, R3 and R3a have a different density standard, so the lot has to be slightly larger for R3a for multi-unit R3a for multi-unit construction.
Okay. So R3 is typically a little denser?
Yes, R3 is 3,630 square feet per unit, and R3a is 4,000 something per unit.
Okay. And I would have sworn that I saw in the package the graphic that you talked about with the contour lines to the edge of the property.
I sent you the definition of building height, and that image
Oh,
is
okay.
in the code related to the definition of
Okay,
building height.
thank you so much.
Yes.
I've gone through this 10 times, and I saw that graphic. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to speak? All right, so I guess I would like to ask for a consent.
Wait a minute,
Wait, sorry.
Councilor Ohm.
Oh,
Okay.
About the grading at the property line, is there a state law about modifying the existing grades at property lines?
A state law?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. And then, are there any neighboring communities that have implemented the bulk plane?
Most have already, yes.
Councilor Hulteen.
All right, let's try this again. I would like to ask for consensus to direct staff to move forward with the recommendation to apply bulk plane citywide in all 8 R-Series zone districts. And we're excited that it can move forward quickly. Do we have consensus for that?
Okay, it looks like we have unanimous consensus. Councilor Weaver.
I just have a quick question. I think it would be really helpful if there was some way of, we did have a lot of questions about the bulk plane in our District 3 meeting, and I was just wondering if there could be a bulk plane 101 or something that we do at the rec center to just let people know that we're thinking about this and addressing it.
We can do something like that. We do have a handout that was meant more for the general public than the building permit applicant, so I can also send that around.
Okay.
And we'll update that to reflect sort of what the new ordinance would be in terms of applying citywide.
Thank you.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. To that end, I mean, is it something that we could put on What's Up Wheat Ridge, just some 101 there? I find that to be such a great resource for that stuff.
Yeah, we can look at that.
I've been thinking of this when I looked at my packet. I was like, there's slabs of butter and there's loaves of bread. Like, that's what I kept thinking every time I looked at it. So together we get buttered toast. But
We
yeah,
will,
the
we'll
graphic-
definitely do a connections article maybe for the next issue too, because by then I think it'd be effective and
I think that's really helpful, having sat in on the Let's Talk. Every time bulk plane came up, there was lots of excitement and interest and very little understanding of it. So I think
enough.
that's really helpful, yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Lauren, thank you very much. Great presentation. Concise. Good. All right. That will take us to agenda item number 3. This is an update on the 44th Avenue sub-area plan. Mr. Goff. You want to have a quick break? Okay, let's break for about 10 minutes. We'll come back at 8:20. Certainly. Go to agenda item number 3, right? And this is the 44th Avenue Sub-Area Plan Update. Mr. Goff.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Stephanie Stevens here tonight, and our consultant, and Stephanie will introduce our team.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Stephanie Stevens, Planner in Community Development, also Project Manager from the city side of things on 44th Avenue Sub-Area Plan, which we're super excited to introduce you to tonight, kind of give a project status update and make sure we're not missing anything from this first round of public engagement. So we've probably all forgotten, but City Council did award contract back in December of 2019, and with the intent to start work on the project in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. So pandemic hit, project went on hold, also needed to prioritize the Lutheran campus master plan, so this one took a back seat for a little bit, but we are back and kicked off in January 2022. So now with that, so the contract was to MIG Inc., who is our planning consultant helping us lead through the process. Other than that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to MIG. This is Mark De La Torre, and we have Jay Rankins on Zoom, and they will be presenting our project status. Thanks.
Mark De La Torre for the record, 4345 Brentwood Street, representing MIG. To start us off, I'm actually going to hand it to the man in the cloud at the moment, so Jay Rankin's disembodied voice will be joining us in a matter of moments. Cue technology. This is for building anticipation. This is intentional.
I'm not seeing the screen, Mark.
I think we can hear you, Jay.
You can hear me?
Yep, all good.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing the presentation.
For the channel 8 feed, can we just switch to the slide deck?
Great. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate it. Jay Rankins, principal with MIG, really happy to be back in front of council, working here on the 44th Avenue Sub-Area Plan. Mark and I are going to give you a really brief presentation, kind of catch you up on the process to date. We'll start with reviewing the scope and schedule. Mark is going to go over some of the existing conditions findings. We'll then have a phase 1 engagement summary. So that's all of our stakeholder and community engagement to date, and then kind of a summary of the key themes coming out of both of those items. And then we'll wrap up with summary and next steps. So on the scope and the schedule, our approach is really to built around a community-led process. And so we want to make sure that the community is a part of every step of the way. We'll talk about how the mechanisms that we're using to do that. We also want to build on existing assets and address the challenges within the public right-of-way for the project. And so that has to do with public lands, but also there's a look at land use and the regulatory framework that would guide private development as well. So we're really making sure that those are working together in concert. We want to utilize an economic development toolkit, thinking about all the different mechanisms that we can use, whether it's a small parcel that wants to simply do some updates to their property, to maybe an assemblage of land where they want to do a new development or redevelopment, looking at a variety of mechanisms there, and then prioritizing connections. And so on the project elements, we really have 3 major components: the foundation, which includes existing conditions, the visioning and key trends and issues, synthesis of all of that into goals and policies, opportunities analysis and recommendations, and then implementation. Those are informed by the technical quantitative analysis, which includes a market study, potential for change analysis, and traffic study. So really, again, looking at those opportunities, and they can come in all different forms, as well as the community outreach. So our outreach strategy is made up of 6 major components. So community meetings, we've had 1 of those so far. We actually partnered with Let's Talk resident engagement program at an open house at the rec center. We have had one round of focus groups so far, 4 of those in the first round. Advisory committee that we're meeting with periodically throughout the process. There's actually been some intercept events already. We anticipate many more this summer, and then What's Up Wheat Ridge as well. This is a more detailed graphic. I know it's probably really difficult to see on the screen. In essence, we are where that yellow arrow is. What I'll point out is, while we're approaching the halfway mark, we're really getting into just now beginning to sort of synthesize some of the things that we're hearing, moving into some of the critical recommendations. And so there's plenty of opportunity if you all or if the community members have not engaged yet in the process to get engaged and really shape what this plan looks like and what the recommendations will be included ultimately.
Thanks, Jay. So the two kind of meaty components that we want to talk about are the findings from the existing conditions analysis that's been performed to date, as well as the key themes that we're hearing from the various outreach opportunities that have been part of phase 1 or the foundation phase. On the analysis part, starting with where we're actually talking about, the 44th Avenue sub-area plan, our boundaries are looking at I-70 as our northern and western boundary and Clear Creek as our southern and eastern boundary, largely building off of the defined boundaries from the Let's Talk program, but knowing that corridor focus in an area that has many other kind of comprehensive elements and points of consideration better serve the larger neighborhoods and needs of the city. From the background standpoint, any planning process starts with a comprehensive plan, builds off of that. So knowing that we start with our structure plan, which is part of the Envision Wheat Ridge that guides strategic future development, looking at the area and focus for the project boundary. You can see representation across many of the assets and foundational elements identified in the structure plan, from neighborhoods and neighborhood buffer areas to little nodes of mixed-use commercial and employment. And then you'll see on the major corridors there definitions of neighborhood commercial corridor and primary commercial corridor, representing Kipling and 44th Avenue, as well as a few commercial centers, both at the neighborhood and community scale, distributed along the corridor and at points of entry into the larger sub-area. We also looked at guidance from other adopted plans, so NRS being one of the more recent ones, Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy. Y'all are intimately familiar with this document. I won't recite much of it, but I do want to point out 2 of those priority recommendations that came out of that plan. One, focused or organized through their corridors, was to complete a corridor plan for 44th Avenue from Wadsworth to Youngfield. You can see we got close, right? We're stopping at Clear Creek, but we did take a much more comprehensive look at the surrounding geographies and the neighborhoods impacted by that corridor. And then on neighborhoods itself, designing appropriate neighborhood-based engagement strategies. So a lot of this builds from the energy and momentum that the Let's Talk resident engagement program for Fruitdale and Anderson Park established as this community engagement process was getting underway. As Jay mentioned, our joint open house with the Let's Talk program, I think, was a great opportunity to transition those near-term needs and priorities into a longer-term vision as we look at a sub-area planning process. The Fruitdale sub-area plan, the prior plan guidance for about a third of the overall geography in this area. Since that was adopted, there's been 2 different types of recessions, a global plague. So some things contextually don't quite line up, but there are a lot of elements from that that are still very applicable today, such as the revitalization and redevelopment for properties along 44th Avenue, a priority during that plan and likely still something that's going to be important moving forward. The overall improvement and maintenance of the condition of properties, both on a residential and commercial standpoint in the larger sub area. Addressing safety and traffic flow. Safety is something that's at the top in terms of a concern and items to address for the Let's Talk program, and it's something that will be consistent moving forward, and the ways to address that are going to need to be comprehensive and kind of multifaceted in nature. And lastly, there are a lot of great community assets already in this area, from the historic park to the other various parks, from Prospect, Anderson, and so forth, and leveraging those community assets is a really important starting point when we think about how to better serve the needs of the community. There were 2 parts of the technical quantitative analysis that were specific to transportation in the market. And I'm going to touch on those briefly in terms of their status. Right now on the transportation side of things, we're really digging into key intersections to explore them in greater detail to understand what are the best ways to provide safety improvements through tiered recommendations. We're looking at both inter and intra, so inter being between, right, the area, the sub-area, and between other areas, and intra being within, so intramurals, intramurals, that being the defining quality there, about connectivity, both in projects and in policies. And then as that moves forward, following tonight and Planning Commission conversations, we want to make sure that that intersection analysis continues at a greater level of detail when we think about potential land use changes. On the market and economic side, we're aggregating data for land use and economic opportunities, and pairing that with community character metrics, which through phase one of the engagement, we're starting to hear what those priorities are, to determine either potential areas of change or areas of economic reinvestment or development. And noting that a lot of those will start to probably aggregate into larger areas, we want to make sure that those areas, if they do rise to the top, you get the requisite amount of additional analysis. So next step there would be to, if larger categories come to the top through that analysis, start having conversations with landowners potentially, determine feasibility of some of the visioning kind of aspects that a sub-area plan typically tackles. Take all the information from the analysis to date at a really high level. There's a clear need for land use direction to set up expectations both for the community and for the city as it relates to consistency in some areas or preservation in others. Knowing that there's strong right-of-way restrictions along 44th Avenue, it's going to be remaining 2 lanes in each direction in terms of travel, so the city can only do so much, and investing in the public realm there is going to necessitate partnerships with the private community. Appropriate housing styles and scales will be an important part of redevelopment, knowing that if infill is appropriate, making sure they're being good neighbors to existing users as change may occur. The existing commercial and retail would benefit from further reinvestment. And then lastly, to underscore once more, safety will need to be addressed through multiple avenues, right? It's not just programs and policies, it's thinking about mobility and land use and all the contributing factors to create a safer and more comfortable neighborhood. Looking at phase one of the engagement, as Jay mentioned, there were kind of 5 major elements in addition to the Let's Talk program that we approached phase one engagement with. That was an advisory committee, which was comprised of recommendations from council representatives in the area as well as the mayor, in addition to business owners, organizational representatives, residents. We had 4 resident and business focus groups, a joint open house, the What's Up Wheat Ridge online activities, which ran for over a month, and then the Intercept event at the Recreation Center kind of towards the end of that. Capturing those conversations, we used a bunch of different techniques. One starting with a digital wall graphic to make sure we were capturing the conversation with our advisory committee live with them during that virtual meeting. Transitioning to more of an interactive mural board for the focus groups to geographically locate concerns, areas of excitement. Y'all can see a lot of the orange and concern kind of hovering around the truck stop down there to the end during this particular focus group session. And when we started pulling all those themes together from all the conversations we were having with the community, what rose to the top was supporting the existing character, and part of that was through compatible development in certain areas and preservation in others. Increasing the number of safe and signalized crossings along 44th Avenue as part of a larger kind of connective strategy to make sure we're providing safe and comfortable connections to destinations within the sub-area and beyond. Supporting and expanding local retail, and that being done through a variety of ways, knowing that wanting more coffee shops and restaurants is not the best way to get there. There are a lot of land use components and regulatory pieces that help us move along the way. And then, again, identifying those areas of either change or expanded kind of economic development to support potentially new retail or new residential that focuses on a vision that's character forward and safety and experientially driven. Last couple of slides here, then I'll hand it off to Jay to wrap up. If we were to organize all of those themes, right, we have our findings from the analysis, we have our themes from phase one of engagement into a couple of large buckets. One of those buckets would be comprehensive investment in 44th Avenue. And as I mentioned, that takes a lot of different forms. Some of the things that we're hearing and through the analysis we're understanding is that there could be more of a mixed use or commercial emphasis east of Kipling and more of a residential and neighborhood focus west of Kipling. Gateway and connective infrastructure at the major points of entry, the crossing with the Clear Creek, not Clear Creek Crossing, as that says, little C there for crossing, the crossing of Clear Creek on the east end, as well as other gateway opportunities into the area. And then that comprehensive public and private realm investments focused on 44th itself. Another big bucket to consider is overall connectivity. So additional vehicular and pedestrian crossings at 44th, west of Kipling. There's about a 1.5 mile stretch of no really signals on that section. It's one of the longest in the kind of the West Metro. So additional signalized safe crossings there. Increased and defined access to the Clear Creek corridor. There's a lot of social trails. There are some defined points, but being really intentional about how we move people down to the Clear Creek corridor. One of the only ways people do move safely east to west in this area of Wheat Ridge. Additional signage wayfinding, and then north-south connectivity, some which may be tied to larger capital improvement projects as we think about that northern boundary. The last piece there is strategic future development, and it starts with increasing safety near the truck stop, and that can take a lot of different forms. From a transportation standpoint, that might be signage wayfinding or signalization, or really thinking about how some of our larger vehicles are moving down there, to anything in terms of redevelopment. We know some redevelopment's already occurring with the site south of the truck stop, so we want to make sure we're thinking about safety first and foremost as development may occur. Minimizing further auto-centric uses. One of the things we heard was we have shops that sell cars, we have shops that fix cars, we have shops that fix specific car parts and sell specific car parts, and we think we have that piece covered, so it may be that there are other uses that come to the corridor that are important for the community in terms of serving their needs. Enhancing and expanding existing amenities, which I mentioned earlier. A nodal approach to reinvestment, ensuring compatibility of change, and then enhancing the quality and character of that change, right? If there is new development, if there is change, making sure that it is compatible with the character of the area.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So where we're going from here, we want to get your input this evening. We have some upcoming meetings that I'll show on the next slide, but based on these key themes, we are going to be focusing on recommendations in several categories. So looking at focus areas, as I mentioned earlier, those could take different sizes. They can be of different types. Again, this is not just a plan for 44th Avenue itself. It is a sub-area plan. So it's really extending from the highway to the north to the creek on the south. So looking at all those different opportunities and different types of focus areas. Some could be recreational, some could be development and focus. Some may just be better community building and placemaking. Corridor improvements, so focusing primarily on 44th and Kipling, but there could be other opportunities there. Mobility and safety goes beyond just the corridors, as I mentioned earlier. Mark mentioned safety goes beyond just traffic safety, but thinking about personal safety, different land uses, activation, eyes on the street. Regulatory support, so looking at what are those recommendations that could be incorporated in future regulatory changes, and then strategic investment, looking at both private and public opportunities and maybe the combination of the two. The phase 2 engagement timeline, we have an advisory committee meeting tentatively set for mid-June, looking at doing a second round of focus groups in late June. We've found that to be a really great way to sort of get additional input. But then we want to have a broader community conversation. So we will be doing a joint open house on Wednesday, July 6th from 4:30 to 6:30. We'll continue to leverage the What's Up Wheat Ridge online activities. We'll make those available the same day as the open house and make sure those are available for about a month period. And then there'll be intercept events, as I mentioned, Music in the Park, Carnation Festival, Dumpster Days, and more yet to be planned. And so this evening, what we're hoping to get from you all would be any sort of discussion you'd like to have about the public feedback that we've received so far in this first phase, which is the visioning phase. And then identifying any feedback or comments that you perceive may be missing from the conversation so far before we advance the project to the next phase. Thank you.
Mark and Jay, thank you very much, and we will throw it open, pardon me, for questions from council. Councilor Nosler back.
Just in some of the, when I was looking through the, I love like looking at those little brainstorming like pieces where you can see what people are thinking, and it's like a big neon sign for pizza and stuff like that.
Joe was in that session.
That's so fun. I wanted to see, since we are looking at, other ways to be engaging in this next phase, on 44th Avenue, there are a lot of schools that are using 44th Avenue. I just off the top of my head, you know, Mountain Phoenix and Compass. You've got Wilmore Davis. I know that's a little bit outside of where this is, but that's all a school zone. And then Peak is right there as well. I'm just wondering, and I realize that schools are winding down right now, but if there's a way to, when we're doing some of that outreach at Anderson or Music in the Park, to do some messaging that really engages with some of the families about the corridor and thinking about their roots, you know, their roots to school and how that all plays together.
That's a great point. If I just follow up to that. So we do have the executive director of Compass on the advisory committee. We reached out to the administrative staff and Tim over at Peak, and unfortunately couldn't get them on the committee, but they're very much aware of the process. And in the focus groups, we have 3 parents that go to Mountain Phoenix. So that was from the get-go the importance of the role that those play, knowing that I'm one of the parents that backs up traffic on 44th at Compass every morning, right? That's the role that those schools play in the corridor. From a safety standpoint to a land use, that's really critical. So moving forward into the summer, I think interesting ways to continue to engage the youth population through the schools is going to be important.
Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation, and Jay. It's always fun to hear what our community thinks of our community, and thanks for all your good work on that. A couple things. One is I do have just a small correction in here. You say that there aren't any bike facilities, and actually Garrison, west of 44th, does have a bike lane.
North,
so
yep.
If you would make note of that. We worked hard to get that. So a couple things. There's nothing in here that particularly surprised me, like what we've been hearing from community members. It's been already identified as a priority, and I will just restate here the importance of safe crossings and controlling traffic, especially west of Kipling. It is a nightmare. We're fortunate that this corridor has a pretty intact sidewalks along 44th, as you noted, not on Kipling. And looking, you know, to Ms. Nosler-Beck's comments, looking at those corridors that connect off 44th to schools as important areas for sidewalks as well. A couple of other things that come to mind for me. So 44th is a little bit eclectic on the commercial front, and obviously has a lot of opportunities for reinvestment as have been identified. I think one of the things that's always really intrigued me about 44th is that it's got this really kind of elegant mix of commercial and retail and industrial. And it's not super articulated anywhere in here, but to me, it's just ripe for creative industry, because those industrial spaces are so important for artists, for affordable studio spaces. So to whatever extent we're able to capture sort of those opportunities, as you know, the industrial use actually being a great asset for both artists as well as you know, manufacturers, small scale manufacturers, whether they're manufacturing beer or other things. I think 44th actually in several spaces is really good for that. And then the last thing, so you know, I mentioned bike ped connectivity. The corridor connecting to the Clear Creek Trail is really important and a little bit scattershot. But also because the east-west corridors are so scarce west of Kipling, I don't know how closely you're looking at the role of the frontage road, but the frontage road actually gets a lot of pedestrian traffic. It is sometimes shocking to me, and good portions of that are a ditch. So I don't know how closely you're looking at that, but if that would be a consideration, since that is one of the other intact east-west corridors that connects in different ways on either side of Kipling. Great, thank you.
Additional discussion? Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mark and Jay, for giving this presentation. You articulated that very quickly and very well. So I appreciate that. And I really look forward to what comes out of this process. And I'm really glad that our neighborhoods are getting some love. And
appreciate Councilmember Hulteen kind of mentioning the diverse kind of commercial uses on 44th Avenue. I think that that might be kind of problematic in how we envision the future of 44th because there's so many varying types of businesses, and in some areas we're really actually automobile like related in most of that corridor actually. And so I really look forward to kind of trying to shift that focus to pedestrians, you know, especially with my kiddos, walking and biking from my house to school. And I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm glad you're undertaking this process.
Thank you. Additional discussion? Councilor Nasser-Beck.
Okay, and just a couple of things that I heard from some folks who said that they missed the rec center engagement, and they just were really talking about like accessibility from some of the more eastern parts of the corridor to Anderson Park along that bridge. I keep telling them that the bridge, the pedestrian bridge over 44th over Clear Creek is getting fixed, so that's really exciting, but it is something just from I've heard it from 5 or 6 different people now in different contexts, and so may not have been captured as much in the sub-area plan. And I'm also encouraging them to go and participate as well, but just getting that out there.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Councilor Hulteen.
I guess we're just volleying back and forth. One other thing, I do realize that the scope of the project does terminate at the eastern edge at the crossing of Clear Creek, not Clear Creek Crossing, for clarification.
Little C.
You know, as somebody who lives on that gap between, you and I both do, Mark, between Wadsworth and Clear Creek, looking at mobility and recommendations that come out of this sub-area plan, I just hope as a city we'll just look and see how that extends to Wadsworth, because, you know, we want to be pulling people, love to be pulling people not on their car, but walking and biking. But I realize the study area from a land use and sub-area plan doesn't extend to the east, but when we're looking at mobility connections, it would just be helpful to see, you know, how does that extend to connect with Wadsworth? Because we do, I mean, we have several commercial properties that, you know, extend about a third into that space. So, great, thank you.
Okay, any additional discussion on this item? Thank you for a very nice report, Stephanie and Mark and Jay. We appreciate you coming to bring this to us and look forward to more work on the 44th Avenue sub-area plan. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our 3 agenda items tonight. We will move now to staff reports. Mr. Goff.
That's it for staff this evening. Thank you.
Okay, we're staffed out tonight. Let's go to elected officials. Councilor Nasser-Beck.
I wanted to give a shout out to all the volunteer coaches that we have as part of our Parks and Rec teams that are out there, whether, you know, it's soccer or some of the other sports that are out there. It's a lot of parents and grandparents and, you know, family, friends who are stepping up to really invest a lot of time and commitment into our kids and teaching them so much through their sports. And so soccer is winding down, and just for our family, the Wheat Ridge Parks and Rec program for soccer is just so amazing and so incredible, and just like I said, huge investment of time for all of those coaches out there too. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional elected officials reports. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. So I hope everyone had a chance to see the eclipse last night. Did anyone else was spectacular. It was,
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was happening. I walked the dogs and I thought it was like the end of the world. It was like, wow. But what was really fun is my neighbors were all gathered in the church parking lot, and so it turned into this
Dark
little-
at 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, it was, it was like, it was just a little 10, 11 p.m. party at the church parking lot, but it was pretty cool. Something else awesome and magical that made my heart happy when I was riding my bike to work this morning, I saw all the city staff putting in flowers along the flower beds on 38th Avenue. And I've just decided that's going to be like my sign that summer's here. And they were actually cleaning off like the gutters and the sidewalks, and it just looked really great to see that kind of pride going into our community. So just to me, that means summer started this morning at about 8:27 a.m. And lastly, I just wanted to follow up. I have a couple constituents who have expressed some just concern and confusion about what's going on at Town Center Park, and it's something I think I've chatted with you about, Patrick, and I'm just wondering if at some point in the near future we can get an update on the process around Town Center Park in terms of pursuing decommissioning it and what that status is. I have a couple constituents that are just concerned that we have a city park that's fenced, and it's not really clear what's going on with that. So if that's something that you could bring an update in a near future meeting, that would be really great.
Can do.
Okay, thank you so much. Counselor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Nosler-Beck and I got to meet with a group of community members this morning, members from faith organizations, almost all of the elementary, middle, high schools. We're putting together a group to really help the local community as far as the schools go. A few months ago, when we were doing our budgeting process, Ms. Nosler-Beck got, I think, $2,500 for that to kind of go into marketing and different things like that to help the schools out. It's grown a lot bigger than I think we thought it would. So anyway, the new group is called Wheat Ridge Community and Family Coalition. We're putting together volunteers, different things like that. But one of the biggest hopes that I think for Ms. Nosler-Beck and I is that we can strengthen our community by helping get the name of our schools out, and not just the test scores and all that stuff, because I think anybody who's had a kid in elementary school knows that test scores are good, but when you walk in and it's that family, community, everybody knows your name, that's a big piece of it and what they're doing social and emotionally for our kids. So you'll hear quite a bit more about the Wheat Ridge Community and Family Coalition, but that's something we're working very hard on. And if there's members of the community that are part of the Rotary, Optimist, any of that, business leaders, we'd love to have you as part of that. You can contact myself, Ms. Nosler-Beck, or we can put you in touch with some of the other schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple announcements from the Carnation Festival. We are now accepting nominations for our royalty. This is a way in which 3 members of the community that have made a great impact can be recognized several times throughout the Carnation Festival weekend, including at the beginning of the parade on Saturday, August 13th. And then our annual plate design contest is in its 4th year now. Well, technically 5th since we took one off, but that contest is opening up soon, and so if there are any members of the art community that want to submit their artwork to be considered by the Cultural Commission for this year's commemorative plate, we welcome you to do that. We'll be posting on Facebook, and there'll be more information on our website as well. There is no theme. It's just Carnation Festival, Wheat Ridge based. Yeah. It's Wheat Ridge Carnation. Yes. Woo.
Post-pandemic. Okay, Councilor Hutchinson.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mayor. I drove down Wadsworth and I saw Wendy's is totally all boarded up. Is that relocating or is it over?
Yes, that was a surprise to us too. They boarded up overnight, and we haven't found out yet exactly what's going on. So what we're trying to figure out what made their decision to close or board up or remodel, or we haven't heard. So we're trying
That
to
was
look into it.
fast.
Yeah.
Because I asked in Arvada at a Wendy's there if they knew what was going on. They said, we haven't heard anything.
Councilor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor. When I was biking on the Clear Creek last week, I noticed there's a lot of kids at the Prospect Park, and my understanding is it's partially reopened with limited access, so enjoy your parks.
Okay. Additional elected officials' reports? All right, seeing none, that will bring us to a close to our meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Once again, all of our counselors are here, and I hope that everyone will join us. We will be here 1 week from tonight for a regular meeting at 7 o'clock. So until then, please drive safely and take care. Thank you so much. We are adjourned.